Hi, y'all. I figured I would go through this press conference here and just share my take on it as we go through it. Um, so here we go.
Good morning. My name is Sergeant Jeremy Pierce, Public Information Officer for the Indiana State Police Lafayette Post. I'd like to thank you all for being here and thank the Delphi United Methodist Church for allowing us to use their facility. This morning we're going to provide an update on the investigation into the murders of Abigail Williams and Liberty German. Before we get started, I'm going to introduce you our speakers, Superintendent of the Indiana State Police, Doug Carter, the Carroll County Sheriff, Tobe Lesenby, and the Carroll County Prosecutor, Nick McClelland. I'd like to remind everyone that this continues to be an active and ongoing investigation. At the conclusion of this press conference, we are going to answer a limited amount of questions out of respect to the investigation and the process that will follow today. We will not discuss evidence that is related to this investigation. On behalf of the Delphi Double Homicide Task Force, thank you all for your continued support. I would now like to introduce to you our first speaker, Superintendent of the Indiana State Police, Doug Carter.
Okay, one thing that just immediately jumps out is this whole investigative team. They're all white men. I'm guessing a lot of them are Republicans. Which I'm an independent and I actually like certain issues I lean Republican, certain issues I lean Democrat, but just the whole diversity of the team there. Well, there isn't any is like basically what I'm saying. So that's just my initial thoughts right out the gate.
Seldom do I have prepared remarks, but today is different because I do not want there to be any confusion or ambiguity with what I will say. Today is not a day to celebrate, but the arrest of Richard M. Allen of Delphi on 2 counts of murder is sure a major step in leading to the conclusion of this long-term and complex investigation. First, I'd like to speak directly to Anna, Mike, Becky, Kelsey, your extended families, along with the entire Delphi community that certainly has grown and now includes our nation and even many countries around the world. I am proud to report to you that today, actually last Friday, was the day. And an arrest has been made. Thanks to literally hundreds of media outlets that have been steadfast in reporting and keeping the memories of Abby and Libby front and center. Many of you in the room have developed relationships with me personally, and you know I always have a personal perspective, and today's no different. But from a very personal perspective, you all have provided inspiration and support, even while oftentimes frustrated with us and me. You continue to encourage the efforts, and you too believe that one day we would all be here participating and sharing this news. To the entire law enforcement community, which includes all local, state, and federal agencies, which are far too many to specifically mention today, thank you, thank you, thank you. We are going to continue a very methodical and committed approach to ensure that if any other person had any involvement in these murders in any way, that person or persons will be held accountable.
Okay, so right there. If they had any chance of like tampering down any speculation or anything like that, any involvement of any law enforcement, family members, basically everything is still on the table because of what he just said right there. Like, it kind of implies that this dude did not act alone. And then, like, he puts it out there that, like, persons or persons. So, like, we're right back to not knowing how many people are involved. Like, what the heck is going on? He just put everything back on the table. So, that's great. And then let's continue on.
Since the murders of Abby and Libby, 2,086 days ago, the daily investigative team has worked tirelessly and is certainly worthy of mention today. Specifically, Sheriff Linsonby, the Sheriff of Carroll County, Detectives Tony Liggett, Detective retired Kevin Hammond, former Delphi Chief and now the prosecutor's investigator Steve Mullins, State Police First Sergeant Jerry Holman, Detectives Jay Harper, Dave Vito, and Brian Harshman, along with members of the United States Marshal Service, specifically Agent Jeremy Clinton and Agent Bill Colfers. With them today is Dan McClain, the U.S. Marshal, appointed U.S. Marshal. Our state police analyst, our scientist from many different disciplines within our laboratory division, Mrs. Kathy Shank, for your incredible dedication to detail, and to so many others that I know I've missed.
Okay, so right there, like, no mention whatsoever of the FBI, and he specifically said our state laboratories, blah 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 blah. What happened to the FBI? Like, there's nobody from the FBI up there, nobody representing them. Like, nobody from the FBI was thanked. Like, they were a like central part of the first press conference, and so I just find it very odd that they're not there, nor thanked or mentioned. And then like, he specifically mentions Sheriff Tobe Lesenby and Tony Liggett, and like I'm just wondering how diverse in political views and just like what kind of atmosphere the investigative team truly is. Like, if somebody has a different viewpoint or like a different opinion, do they just get like booted from the team? Or so that's just another observation, but let's continue on.
I really believe that Abby and Libby would be proud of you for standing strong, even in the face of immense pressure and perpetual criticism. Some of these individuals have postponed retirement, passed on promotional opportunity, have dedicated personal time away from their families, given up nights, weekends, and holidays, all while in the pursuit of accountability for Abby and Libby. I know that today's announcement will not diminish your resolve, and I hope you have found just a bit of peace in this most complicated world. This is really important. While I know you are all expecting final details today concerning this arrest, today is not that day. Today is not that day. This investigation is far from complete, and we will not jeopardize its integrity by releasing or discussing documents or information before the appropriate time. Prosecutor Nick McClellan, of course, will share additional information about what we can and cannot say, and also explain to you why the probable cause affidavit is temporarily sealed by the court and not available. And by the way, he has been a tremendous asset to this team. I'm yet again asking you for your patience and please your understanding while our system of due process works. Also remember that all persons arrested are presumed innocent. All persons arrested are presumed innocent. You all will have an innate desire to subjectively interpret and then report what you think. We in the law enforcement realm cannot, and you should never allow us to, talk about what we think concerning facts.
Okay, so how are we supposed to not allow you to discern things except for facts when we don't know anything? Like, we would like to hold people accountable. As far as what I was seeing is during this sheriff election process, things are starting to come out. Like, there was a lawsuit filed in which they said the outside help was not brought in, and the former prosecutor Ives agreed and said that he does remember specifically saying that outside help needed to be brought in, and that it wasn't, and it wasn't followed up on. Also, during a sheriff's debate, there was mention again of agencies who had offered their help and were denied. And so that's interesting that this press conference comes right before the election. To my knowledge, the election hasn't happened yet, and it's about to. Like, it's very close to happening. And so that's interesting. And having things sealed, like, okay, you say that he has the presumption of innocence and that nobody should be jumping to conclusions, etc., etc. But you arrested this guy and you're holding him without bail and without the oversight of public, like the media and citizens. That's actually our job, or our part in this social contract, is they are there to serve and protect us, right? And we give up some of our rights as citizens in order for them to be able to protect us, right? But in turn, they have an obligation to us and a responsibility to make things transparent as possible. And I just have a hard time believing that nothing could be released. Like, absolutely nothing is able to be said at this press conference that you had all of these people come to. Like, people bought plane tickets to come here. People, like, a lot of people are there for them to not give out any information. It's kind of like, I feel like this is like a joke, or it's like a TV show or something. I don't know. But you arrested this guy, and it is, if they have enough to arrest somebody, we as citizens should know what things caused that arrest, because we don't want them to be able to come and just arrest us without anyone knowing why. And like, that is an actual law, and for them to seal this, that's very rare. And I can't see in what situation that this is a good idea. Because if they had enough to arrest him, then already they're saying that, like, we have enough to take this to trial and stuff. And so it's going to come out in the trial, right? Like, he has a right to know what evidence they have against him so that he can prepare his defense to that. So what is going on here? Like, what are they clearing up? What is the point of this press conference, I guess?
Or rather discuss and share at the right time what it is we know. The time will come when additional details can be released. But again, today is not that day. It's about Abby and Libby, their families, and this community, this nation, and even our planet. The prosecutor has been very clear with law enforcement about what his expectations are, about what can and cannot be released, shared, or discussed. So we will, of course, comply.
Okay, so on that note, what are those boundaries? Like, what things can be shared and what things can't be shared? Not the specifics of them, but what in general are these things that can and cannot be shared? Because this should apply across the board to all cases. So, if you have these standards of specific things that can and cannot be shared, that can and cannot be discussed, we should know what those parameters are so that we we know how to hold our public officials accountable.
If you choose to be critical of our silence, be critical of me, not the front line.
Okay, so he just said that it was the prosecutor who set these parameters about what could be released and what can't be released and what can be talked about and what can't be talked about. But then he says to hold to put it all on himself. Well, no, that's not how it works. Law enforcement is accountable to the people, and that's all on the whole force, all of you guys. Because if you don't have any faith in your public officials, or you're in the small town of Delphi, and there's like a certain, let's call them a ruling class, like the sheriff doesn't seem to have much accountability. There's no body cameras worn, there's no dash cameras, there's no car GPSs. This was all in the debate that just happened for sheriff's office. And the citizens were questioning, why do they not have any of these things in place? How are you supposed to know what is going on, to see if you're spending citizens' tax dollars in the best way possible? And is Carroll County safer because of it? Are your policies fair across the board? Um, like, are they working? Well, nobody knows because none of this data is being collected or shared with the public. It's not just this one case, it's across the board. They don't have any accountability, and that is a problem.
These are the folks that have committed their entire lives to a successful conclusion.
A successful what? A successful collusion? Freudian slip? I don't know. That was funny.
In other words, a guilty verdict. As we move to the next phase of this investigation, I will continue to offer all resources that the ISP has to not only the investigative team I anticipate growing, but also to Prosecutor McClellan as we prepare for the coming months. Again, Nick has been very resolute and very clear, and I'm most grateful for his leadership. And it's going to be really important as we move forward. Please continue offering tips that you would like to share. The many avenues to report will remain open and will be available to all. Please continue doing that.
Please continue calling in tips on what? Like, you continue to offer support. So from things I've heard, people say like, oh, it doesn't really matter what's going on in Carroll County because the Indiana State Police is like leading this investigation. But it's clear in the way that he's speaking that they are not leading this investigation, that they are offering support and they're there for whatever this investigative team needs, but that Nick McClellan is a leader and they appreciate his leadership, as well as seems like Tobe is a big head person in this, and also Tony Liggett. So for this sheriff's race that's happening, like, I personally would vote for the other guy just because it's good to mix things up, like, and that would shake things up. So maybe that's something they're concerned about. I'm not sure.
In closing, I stand before you in this church and very place where we held our first briefing nearly 6 years ago, and just hours after the murders of Abby and Libby. Right here. Pulling in today, I wasn't really sure what emotion I would experience. But peace came over me. And I didn't expect that to happen. And I hope all of you, with all the different responsibilities you have from around the planet today, have felt some of that as well. But remember, we're not done.
Okay. From around the planet, I don't know what that's all about. That's really like just theatrics. Like, what does that even mean? It's kind of, what are you talking about? Like, this is the kind of stuff that people get on you about because we're talking about America, in Indiana, in Carroll County, in Delphi, and these specific laws and regulations dictate a lot about the case. And so these things are very specific, and the citizens have to vote on these things. And if there's a problem in any of these layers of the justice system, well, the citizens need to be able to look at that information and be able to tell if there is. And so when you're talking about like the planet overall, I feel like that's a wide net to be casting when this is a very specific, this is a press conference on the arrest of a citizen of Delphi for a double homicide. And they barely even said his name one time. They don't have his picture up anywhere. Like, if I was his family, I would be going like, this is this is not okay. Like, they just arrested my loved one, and I don't know why. Like, I don't know if she knew or not, like his wife knew or not, but nobody else seemed to have him pegged. Like, he also has rights. I don't think he has a criminal history. I don't know, because they're not discussing anything about him. So let's get back to this.
I think what we all have experienced proves that together there's nothing we cannot do. But more importantly, giving of ourselves, all of us, giving of ourselves matters more than what we could ever receive. Abby and Libby, though in death, have had a profound effect on so many of us, on how we live, and as importantly, who we all should be. I would now like to introduce to you my friend and the Carroll County Sheriff, Tom Lidsby, for his remarks. Sheriff.
Okay, so I'm honestly really surprised that he didn't like plug the Indiana State Police reward fund, the Indiana State Police Alliance, which is it's not state run, it's like a nonprofit or private organization, LLC, something like that, right? That is managing the reward fund. And what that means is that they have that money to put into like stocks, bonds, whatever. I'm not very financially literate, but this is my understanding of how this organization operates. It is an organization that is for Indiana State Police and their families to help them with legal costs, and it is like you pay a due either like I think yearly or something, and in turn, if you have legal problems, they will help you to fight those, And they also are like, they do stuff with that money. They invest it. They basically play the market in order to increase that money, right? And so let's get back to this.
I believe in a God of justice and righteousness.
Oh, good Lord. I know you're in a church tub right now, but there's this little thing, it's called separation of church and state. And I just don't really think that this is appropriate for a law enforcement officer. I'm not saying you shouldn't have religion. I'm fine with them practicing whatever religion that they want. But in law enforcement, I feel way more comfortable having him talking about the facts and the evidence and the data.
Today, I believe that same God has provided us with justice for Abby and Libby. As Sheriff of Carroll County, Indiana, I want to publicly and sincerely thank each individual who played a role in helping us during this 5.5-year investigation. Whether it was in an investigative capacity, providing tips, cards or letters of suggestions or encouragement, phone calls, and thousands of other countless ways of communicating.
Okay, there's not thousands of other countless ways of communicating. There is a definitive number of. Tobe really gets me. One, what's going on? I thought he got like hair plugs and like he had a whole vibe going to him before. And like, I feel like he's almost back to exactly how he was when we started, which is just a little bit odd. His whole demeanor, the way he's speaking is very like confident. And before he seemed very like stand backish. So this is like a whole new Tobe. I don't really understand. As far as his thousands of ways of communicating, possibly like he's been communicating on different frequencies than everybody else, because every story that I saw that reached out to Tobe did not receive any statements, callback, nothing. So, okay, that's all I'm going to say on that for right now.
I earnestly thank those who prayed for this moment in time. We now move forward through the Indiana criminal justice system, allowing the system to provide its due diligence and process in providing that justice which is owed Abby and Libby, their families, in this community. Thank you.
Okay, so this just reminds me of early on in this investigation. Tobe was being interviewed, and he said, I don't think that they're like, this has never happened in this town before, and I don't think that there is a right way or wrong way, or like, there's no books on how to deal with this. But like, there literally are tons of books on it. It's a whole degree you go for in college, which maybe the Delphi sheriffs don't know, because it seems like they recruit people and then they go into it as like a volunteer deputy and then end up getting hired on. So they don't actually have any like formal education on criminal justice or any law enforcement degrees or anything like that. And so maybe that's why he was confused, and that there's no book on how to deal with this. But there is in fact a lot of books on how to deal with this, and that's one thing that criminal justice reform really needs, is a standard way of things that need to be collected, the way that they're collected, the way that they're input into a system, that can be shared and looked back on, so that you know what things maybe like there was a problem with that you could improve on, or what things went right, and also share that data amongst other law enforcement so that you know if your tax dollars are being spent in the best ways possible, or if there's some things that you could improve on to improve safety for everyone, and also best spend your tax dollars to serve and protect the citizens of Delphi.
Welcome, everybody. My name is Nicholas McClellan. I'm the Carroll County Prosecutor, and before we get started, I want to reiterate some of the things that Sheriff Lesenby and Superintendent Carter stated. I first want to thank both of them. They've been a great support to my office throughout this investigation. They've always been there for a phone call and always been willing to help a hand or a line of assistance to me and my office during this investigation. I want to thank the team behind me. This is the Homicide Task Force team that we've put together. Thank them and thank their families for being so understanding for the many nights they've worked away from their families, away from their children. There are many dates in a lifetime that you're going to remember. The date your children are born, the date you're married, the date you buy a first house, the date Abby and Libby went missing. One of those dates was last Friday, October 28, 2022. At that time, we had gathered evidence to formulate a PC that we submitted to the court, and the judge did find probable cause for an arrest of Richard Allen. He's been charged with 2 counts of murder for the murder of Abigail Williams and Liberty German. This investigation is still very ongoing. We're keeping the tip line open, the tip email open. We encourage everybody to continue to call in tips, not only about Richard Allen, but about any other person that you may have.
What? What are you talking about, dude? Didn't you just say somebody was arrested in this case? Like, to call in tips on anyone and everyone? Like, this is the kind of ambiguity that makes people speculate on everyone, including law enforcement and the families. I'm just saying, this would be a good time to clear up some stuff that you guys have said and put out there that have caused so much speculation in this case. But instead, they reiterate these things that cause people to speculate, and with good reason. They are putting this stuff back out there instead of clarifying and reeling in and redirecting people to know what direction are they actually headed. Because he says that they come up with probable cause. PC is what he said, but it's probable cause affidavit. And these things are usually, once the person is arrested and put in jail, they are to be unsealed and released to the public so that we can scrutinize whether that was a good decision to go arrest that person and hold them in jail without bond. But that is sealed. And then he goes and says, like, please continue to call in tips, not just on this guy, but on everybody. Like, okay, like, what is the point of this press conference? It is so confusing to me. Like, they're not clarifying very much, but maybe I'm speaking too soon. Let's continue on.
For that reason and for the nature of this case, the probable cause and the charging information has been sealed by the court. I've been very clear to everybody that per the court order, we cannot talk about the evidence that's in the probable cause or the evidence that's in the charging information. That will become evident to you at some point and it'll be released, but right now is not that day.
Oh, okay. So because it's sealed, they cannot talk about it. That's very convenient. Like, because this will go to a trial where the judge will decide whether this should remain sealed or not, whether it should be released to the public, because the public does have a right to know a lot of things. But in this case, they could arrest him on Friday, get a quick sealment, but like, basically the judge is probably just sealing it, hasn't really heard the case yet because this all happened on a Friday. Judges want the weekend off. They want to go home too. And so the prosecutor probably said, like, can you seal this? And they're like, okay. And then they set it to be addressed at a court hearing because this is what's required by law to retain the information that should be released to the public. And so then can say, oh, you know what? We actually can't talk about any of this information because it's sealed.
Today's about Abby and Libby, focusing on them. Mr. Allen has had his initial hearing. He's entered a preliminary plea of not guilty. The matter's been set for a pretrial on January 13th at 9 a.m., 2023, and a trial date of March 20th, 2023 at 9 a.m. He is presumed innocent. We will have an opportunity and day in court when we can present the evidence that we have against him. But until that day, he is presumed innocent. I want to open up to a few limited questions from the audience. But again, keep in mind, we are not going to talk about the evidence that we have in this case or about the charging information. We cannot.
Okay. Today is about Richard Allen, who you have charged with 2 counts of murder. These are very, very serious charges. Like, why did you guys schedule a press conference to not tell people anything? Like, you should have maybe scheduled like a celebration of life for Abby and Libby. Like, and they are very important, don't get me wrong. But this is just, I listened to it live and I was like, how is this happening? Like, everybody should have a problem with this. This is, like, why are you even opening up for questions? Watch. Reporters are going to ask, blah, 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 blah. And he's going to say, we can't talk about that. And then another reporter is going to say, hey, like, what led you to this guy? And he's going to say, oh, we can't talk about that. Well, what about this? Oh, we can't talk about this. Then just don't even take questions because you're not going to answer any of them anyways. But let's see. Maybe he'll answer 1 or 2.
Things have been sealed by the court. And so I want to open up a few questions.
Prosecutor, when did Richard Allen become a suspect, and do you think he acted alone?
Again, that's part of the investigation, so I'm not going to talk about those things. What I can say is that we have probable cause established by the court for his arrest, and he is in custody. He's being held currently without bond.
How long has he been a suspect?
I'm sorry? Again, that gets into the evidence we have of the investigation, and I know from everybody it's frustrating. I know everybody, not only reporters, but the family, everybody wants to know more information. I understand it's frustrating, but my goal is to maintain the integrity of this case.
Superintendent Carter, you had said that you believe that you had spoken to the suspect or the suspect's family 2 years ago. Is this man one of those people?
Again, I appreciate the question, but we're getting into the timeline of events, and today's not the time to do that.
Can you talk about how rare it is?
The family, I know you've had a lot of conversations with them. You were almost in tears pretty much when you started off this press conference. Can't imagine how emotional it is for everybody that's worked on this case. What was your conversation first like with the family of Abby and Libby when you were able to tell them you finally got the suspect?
It was a very personal moment for me, and I think it was a very personal moment for them, for all of us that have had interaction with the family. We developed a relationship that I think is going to last at least one lifetime, and maybe a second. So it was a very, very, very sad yet a very humbling experience.
Superintendent, you asked for tips, detective work, it was a reward for $325,000. Did this all come together to make this nexus? Is that the combination of all 3 things that led us to this day, or is it one or the other?
Well, eventually you'll be able to see what led us to this day, but again, today's not that day. To include the reward, you mentioned that, Raphael, about the reward itself, and again, very premature for us to talk about that. There's still a tremendous amount of work to do.
Okay, so it's too premature to talk about the reward, but it's not too premature to arrest somebody for a double homicide. This is somebody who nobody had on their radar, who worked in Delphi. As far as I know, he doesn't have an extensive criminal background, and so I'm just wondering how, like, it's too premature to talk about any of that stuff. But like, if it's too premature for you guys to talk about any of the stuff, then maybe it's too premature for you to have arrested him. But it does kind of make sense if you wanted to make a quick arrest because there's a sheriff's race coming up and it wasn't looking very good for your preferred candidate because some questions were being raised about the handling of this case. And I'm hoping that somebody from the audience asks him about their progress in the Flora case because these cases are kind of linked. Whether the perpetrator is the same, they're children, like young girls who were stolen from their families. And whoever did these, like, just the worst of the worst, have been running around for like 6 years. So, like, what is going on? In both cases, no information is released. The Flora case, they took them to court to get the 911 tape released, and the judge said that they needed to release it, and they still didn't release it. And so, this whole transparency thing, like, people say we don't have a right to know, but we absolutely do. And I think this is a very important thing for people to understand, that in order for us not to just have like unreasonable searches and seizures, just arrests before they maybe have all the information, like, they've allowed a lot of people to be spoken about as like murderers or potential participants, and not cleared up any of their mistakes when they're giving information to the public. These things are all problems, in my opinion. But let's continue on here.
So you're going to say that Abby and Libby have taught you in depth that we can remain to continue on with it.
I think probably resilience and understanding the value of each and every day. That today was the day, but I didn't anticipate they ever thought today would be their day. And
Wait, what? Their day? Is he talking about Abby and Libby, or he's talking about perpetrators? Because this is what makes people confused.
I feel like I've known them for a long time. Excuse me?
Do you assume there's any other individuals involved in this case?
We haven't closed the door on the investigation. And so that's why we keep the tip line and the tip email open. And so we're not presuming anything at this point, but we're going to continue to take tips, continue to take any information anybody has. And as we've done with all the information we've gathered, we're going to look at that and examine that and see where it leads us.
Mr. Prosecutor, can you explain the law? You've asked the court, based on this investigation, that these documents should remain out of the public view. Can you explain, without getting into the details of what's in the documents, but this is not regular. Usually a public hearing is held. We should be able to see all the documents, right?
Sure, sure.
You made a decision. Can you explain your decision as to why you believe that maybe for the next 30 days, no one in this room should have access to those records?
Sure. It is unusual. We don't do it very often in all the cases that we handle here in Carroll County. We did it in this case because the investigation is still open. And while all cases are important, the nature of this case has some extra scrutiny with it. And so my office, felt it was important to seal those records. There will be a public hearing on whether or not those records are going to remain sealed or not. There'll be public notice for that hearing so that everyone can attend, but there will be a hearing to determine whether or not they're going to stay sealed. But for now, to me, it's about protecting the integrity of this case. I want to have an opportunity at some point to have an opportunity in court to explain the evidence and for that not to be tarnished or tainted or anything like that. Again, he's presumed innocent. And so it was important for me in this case to do that.
Okay, so he said that that there's extra scrutiny involved in this case, and so that is why he wants it to be sealed. This right here is exactly the issue. There's supposed to be scrutiny when you arrest somebody for a double homicide, put them into jail, and hold them without bail. So to say that he's presumed innocent, No, he absolutely is not. He's in jail right now for a double homicide. And so that is the reason why these things are supposed to be public, is so there can be scrutiny on you arresting somebody and putting them into jail without bail, without this trial that this hearing that he's talking about. This should have already taken place before they scheduled a press conference, or like that hearing that should be open to the public. That should have happened on Friday before it was sealed in the first place. But nobody even knew about the hearing on Friday because, like, they say, he said everybody can attend that. Look at all these people you had come out to this press conference, and for what? Like, okay, let's get back into it.
Hold on just a minute. We're not going to comment on that right now as part of the investigation. Again, we just encourage everybody to continue to call in tips if they have them about anybody, and we'll examine those tips.
How does it feel for you guys to have searched nationwide for nearly 6 years, going all over the place, only to find your guy, down the street from your office?
That's a hard question to answer. It's a mixed emotions. I've been watching the news all weekend like everybody else has, and I think a lot of the members of the public said it right. It's bittersweet. It's a step in the right direction. It's concerning that he's a local guy. So I think just different emotions. Again, this is a step in the right direction. This is the first step into getting into court and having a trial. And so.
Has Mr. Allen been cooperative?
All right. That concludes our press conference today. Shortly, I will be releasing a press release that will have his photo and a couple more details that'll also be here for handout. That'll also be on the Indiana State Police Lafayette Post Facebook page. Right after this press conference, I'm going to send it out. There's also hard documents in the back. Thank you all for taking the time to be here today, and be safe as you travel home.
There's just like dead silence. People are like, WTF. Like, they just like cop out. They answer like a few questions, which, like, I'm saying answer a few questions. That's very loosely, because they didn't really answer very many questions. And thank God for Rafael Sanchez, I believe, is who asked the question of, this information is supposed to be available to the public. What made you feel like this case, that the public shouldn't have access to any of that information for 30 days? Like, this, and then he just says because there's public scrutiny. Like, that's, I don't know. I just feel like this whole press conference was a joke, and like they don't even sound like very sure of the guy that they arrested. They're like, but continue calling in stuff because we can't really talk about anything, but keep calling in tips. Okay, thanks guys. Let me know your opinions, comments, whatever, in the comment section. Maybe I'm out of line, but I really am kind of upset about this. And yeah, let me know what you think.